everyone. I am Jennifer Crosswhite Vanderklipp. I am the managing editor at TCK Publishing. Jacob Mohr and I, Jacob is our senior editor at TCK. We are going to be answering questions for you guys today. So this is your time to go ahead and ask us anything that you would like about editing, writing, publishing. We will certainly do our best to answer your questions. And we have some sent in already, and we're going to start with those here in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and find Jacob on here, and this is a little new, so we're going to go ahead and try and figure out how to get all of this, figure out what I need to do here. I'm supposed to swipe to find him. I'm not finding him. Swipe left. Okay. Here we go. Now I can see my live viewers, I think. Well, there's boxes where people are supposed to be, but here's Jacob. All right. Bring Jacob on camera. So, it's in the process. He's supposed to be joining here any minute. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Rachel. Thanks for being with us. Hey, Jacob, you're here. Yay.
Hey, I am here. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. We made it. So,
this is wizardry. I have no idea how this is working. I can see you, I can see me, and I can see the rest of the world.
It's interesting, right? Technology, and I guess this having two people on Facebook
it's
Live
sorcery.
So it's kind of cool. We are technologically on the cutting edge, apparently. So we're going to check it out and see how this works.
Really?
All right. Well, I'm going to start a little bit. We've got a few questions that already came in, and I'm going to go ahead and start with a few of those. A couple of the questions we got in were about editing, and so I'm going to go ahead and just talk about that briefly. A couple people have said, hey, should I just go ahead and hire a proofreader instead of a full editor for my book? Obviously, a lot of times proofreading is cheaper, but I'm going to explain a little bit the whole process of editing so you guys can get a sense of where your project goes through the different editing stages and why it's so important to go through those stages. So proofreading is really the very final edit. What you generally start out with is a developmental edit, which looks at the structure and the character and the arc and all of those things, the big picture kinds of things of your story. That's super important to have that done by a good editor, certainly as much as you can. If that's the only edit you can pay for, that is really a great edit to have, because that means your story is solid, your character is solid, and we'll be able to go ahead and work with that story already. So that is really the most important edit you can, because that gets your story in great shape. Then the next level of edits is a copy edit, and that is just looking at the structure of the sentences and the paragraphs and making sure everything flows really well. And the very final edit is a proofread, and that's just really checking for typos and punctuation. So if you start at the proofread and then you move in to a developmental edit, you're doing things backwards. So basically, if you have huge problems with your story or with your characters and you just do a proofread, all you're doing is just kind of polishing something that really is structurally unsound. It would be kind of like painting a building before it's finished being built. So my take on that is to always get the top level edit first, a good structural proofread, somebody who knows a lot about story and how that works together. I highly recommend that before any kind of proofread. So I hope that answers, like there's about 5 questions about that. So I'm hoping that that answers some of you who had that question about the process. Jacob, did you look on the list and see if anything that jumped out at you that you are interested in jumping in on and answering? We might have a little bit of a delay there. Okay, well, another question we had is about the sequence. Are you back, Jacob? Okay, can you jump? Do you want to jump on? That's
sorry, you cut out there. I couldn't really hear you.
I was just going to ask you if there was some of the questions that jumped out at you that you wanted to go ahead and answer.
Oh, There was one question that really stuck out to me is like how many edits does it take before your book is ready to send out to publishers, or before, or basically like, before it's ready to send out, or before it's ready to like really to be seen by the world. And um, this might seem like a bit of a cop-out answer, but like as many as it takes, like until you think the book is ready. And a lot of what can help with writing, in my opinion, is like reading other people's stuff. Like see what other people are doing, see what looks to you like a finished book. And if you've read through your manuscript, of course you're going to be more familiar with it than anybody else will be. But if you've read through it and it feels finished to you, like really until someone else looks at it, you're the only judge of this. Like it has to feel finished to you. And of course, like, you know, reading and editing is very subjective, but at the same point, like at some point you have to make that call. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think among published authors, you can find a wide range of how many drafts and edits and outside editors do they hire before they even submit it to either their agent or their publishing house. And then certainly in-house, we have, you know, at least 4 rounds of edits, sometimes more, depending if it needs to go back to the author a few more times. So generally, that's one of those things that happens. You know, again, I think your first answer, as many rounds as it needs, is really a good one, because you want it to be polished as best it can. You want it to be a great experience for the authors, for readers to have, and for it to be enjoyable, because otherwise people will get part way through your book, and if you might understand your characters, you might know where your story is going, but if you haven't had an outside person address that, you know, it's hard to know if you've translated that onto the page correctly. So it's a really, really good point.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul has asked, how difficult is it to upload or transfer a book that's been edited and proofed to Amazon from Microsoft Word? And why isn't there software for book writers that allows a book to be written with built-in guardrails similar to doing taxes on TurboTax? Okay, that's a good, there's 2 questions in there. The first one I can answer, the second one I can't answer. It's not terribly difficult to upload a manuscript through Amazon through Microsoft Word. You can certainly take your Word document and upload it. You don't have very much control over what it looks like, but certainly plenty of people do that, and that's certainly a legitimate way to go. Obviously, you have Microsoft Word, it's a very low-cost thing to do, so certainly people do it, but you do not have a lot of control over how Microsoft Word translates into that finished product. So you may or may not be happy with that, but it certainly is a way to go. My stab at the second part of why someone hasn't developed software, there is some things out there. There used to be something called Story Editor years ago. Now Scrivener is kind of the big thing. It has templates built in that kind of helps guide you through some different ways. But I think the thing is that it's taxes is not a creative process, so you can have rules that fit. You know, if you go with the government guidelines, you get in trouble. But writing is a creative endeavor. And so there aren't those kinds of guidelines or rules. Sometimes people have certainly successfully broken the traditional rules and done a great job of that. But there are certainly some guidelines and rules that are there for a reason. So I think it would be maybe the equivalent of paint by numbers if you had something like that in software. So that's probably why it hasn't really been developed, because it wouldn't give you a great kind of product out there.
To that, Jennifer, I would add that, you know, I'm sure there are various blogs and books and resources out there that tell people how to write their books. They provide, you know, certain formulas or certain patterns to follow. But if you write a book by a formula, you're going to get a formulaic story, and I don't think anybody wants that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Yeah, there are things that are elements that are common to good stories that you certainly want to follow. But if it's like you're saying, if it's, hey, chapter 1, you know, the bad guy shows up and the good guy has to shoot him, and then in chapter 2, this has to happen. That, you know, yeah, you're going to get the same variation on a theme. And certainly there are some genres that's more true than others. But ultimately, you want to have a story that feels true and fresh and resonates with your readers. So this, I'll answer this question. We got a question in from Dana, who, this is kind of a more nonfiction. She's asking about the sequence for putting a book out. And so talking about, when do you find a topic that you're going to write on? How do you research that and decide if it's a good topic? That's a good question. I think you can definitely use Amazon for that. You can go and see what some of the things are that are selling in those different categories. That's a great way to look, especially if you're thinking about writing any kind of how-to book or anything like that. That's a great way to go ahead and just see what's selling out there, because if something's selling, then that means that somebody else probably is interested in your take on that. So it's a great place to start. The second, they're wanting to know, when do you start your website or email list? I'd say as soon as possible. Your email list is your great way to build people you can market to directly. So as soon as you can build that email list, absolutely start going on that. Your pre-sale sequence, that's going to depends on what you're going to do and how you're going to handle it. But basically, you're going to need your book written. You got to write it, right? It needs to be edited. Some people like to send it out to beta readers, which are people that have a knowledge of what you're writing about, and they can give you feedback of if you've hit that topic or not. That's really a great thing to do. Then, of course, it's going to go through the full publishing process, whether it's through TCK or you do it by yourself or anything in between. You're going to have to still get it edited, proofread, formatted, a great cover, and then you're going to need to upload it. Amazon does have a pre-sale option. Can be a little bit risky to play with, but it can be a nice option if you are confident that your manuscript is going to be uploaded on time. And if it is, then it'll shoot out to whoever's pre-ordered it on the day of your release. And then after that, you start marketing. So, and then that's the lifelong process of the whole book. So that's kind of an overview right there. Jacob, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, sure. Jess has asked us, I'm assuming I'm saying that right. Jess has asked us, do you have any tips for writing a mystery story without using a cop as your main character? That's a very good one. And as I understand the genre, I'm not a huge mystery guy, but I've read a couple of really great mysteries myself. Basically, like, if you're writing a mystery story, it doesn't matter who your main character is, as long as they're, as the name of the genre is, just trying to solve a crime or just something they don't understand. Like, there are a lot of cops in crime fiction and mystery fiction, of course, because they have the most resources and wherewithal and know-how in order to solve these kinds of things. But it can actually be to your benefit to try unusual characters in these scenarios. Like somebody who's not a cop or not a private detective, they have more in their way and more obstacles in their way in order to solve whatever is facing them. But that can be an added source of drama. That can be an added source of conflict, and actually make your story a whole lot better and a whole lot more interesting. So, I hope that actually solves your question. But do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, Agatha Christie's Miss Marple was an elderly lady, just like on Murder, She Wrote. Jessica, whatever her Fletcher, she was a mystery writer, right? But even now on the Hallmark Channel, Aurora Teagarden, she's a librarian. And I know Christy Barrett has a series, Squeaky Clean Mysteries, and the person is a crime scene cleaner. So really, anybody that's just nosy is a great main character. You can have like the nosy next door neighbor or whoever, because they're just going to be the person that's going to keep pushing to solve the mystery. And, it's kind of nice that they're not a cop, because sometimes, the cops push them away and aren't really interested in what they have to say. So it's a great, nice twist. It makes it kind of a fresh take on that genre. So yeah, I agree with what you were saying on that. Maureen asks, when writing a children's book for the 3 to 7-year-old age group, should it be submitted with or without illustrations? So traditionally, when you do children's books, you don't submit with illustrations. Every publishing house has their own illustrators that they're going to use. And so you're going to want to submit without illustrations, and the house will get their own illustrator to do it. If you are an illustrator, then a great place to check out is the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI. They have a great resource for writers and illustrators just of children's books, and it's a great place to go and make those connections and find out everything about that particular industry. It's a very niche industry, and it's a challenge right now because illustrations don't transfer well to ebooks. The way the everything works that way, it just doesn't work very well with ebooks, and so they tend to have to be print. Print is expensive, and so that is kind of a challenging market right now. So, but that SCBWI is a great resource for people that are interested in children's books for sure. Okay. All right. Jacob, do you have anything on the list that pops out of you want to answer?
Yes, I do. Idra asked us, again, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing these right. Idra asked us, can I write a book without fancy words and metaphors, and would that be boring? To that I say, go ahead and read some Ernest Hemingway, because he has one of the most flat and the most simple, and in my opinion, one of the most elegant writing styles ever put to print or ever put to ebook or whatever you want to say, that he was able to tell a story almost entirely without even multi-syllable words. Like he had for him. He was able to make that work for him, and I guess there's no right or wrong way to write a story. Like if you want to write a story in a certain style and it works for you and it sounds good to you, chances are it'll sound good to somebody else as well.
That's exactly it, I would say. I mean, absolutely don't use any sort of fancy words or metaphors if that is not your style, because it will come through and feel like it's not your real voice. The most powerful thing you can do as a writer is develop your voice. And that is who you are. Nobody else can quite capture that. You could write the same basic story as somebody else, but you're going to tell it in a different way because it's your voice. And so however your voice is, that is exactly what you should embrace and continue to grow and develop. And be as natural as you are, whoever that is, and just embrace that. Absolutely. And I'll piggyback on that with a question from Kyle. Kyle says, how do you develop a powerful theme that draws readers into wanting more with the character and the plot? And to that, I would say theme is one of those subtle threads that you almost find after you've written the story. I think if you start out with a theme in mind, it needs to be very subtle and very off to the side, because we've probably all read books where you can tell the point the author was trying to make. Every single scene, every single word was all about this particular topic or point, or however they were point of view they're going to put out there. And it feels a lot like preaching, and readers are real sensitive to that, and they don't like to be preached at. They just want a story to unfold in a very natural way. That being said, I think most writers find that after they've written their first draft, there is a theme, whether it's forgiveness or adventure or trust, whatever it might be. There is something about what the characters are doing and how they are moving through the story that is reflective of that theme. And then you can go back and add that in the places that's already occurring naturally. You can might make it, just raise it up a little bit. But theme is a lot like salt in a recipe. You know, a little goes a long way. If you put in too much, then it kind of ruins the whole thing. Jacob, what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely agree with you. I think that, at least in my preference, the author should begin writing their story just as a story with almost no regard to the themes whatsoever, and let the story tell you what it's about over the course of writing it. Because, at least in my experience, your average reader can enjoy a story for the story without really paying attention to the themes, but they can't enjoy the themes without paying attention to the story. You need to have a good story first. And again, people don't like preachy stories that much, you know. No one likes being told what to think. They want to be able to draw the themes out for themselves, to really engage with the text.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. for sure. Um, I'm going to let you take this next one, but I'll jump in as soon as you're finished answering the one from Scott about sci-fi.
Oh, yeah. Scott has asked us, how is TCK Publishing set up for dealing with science fiction? I am a member of the SFWA, and I was wondering what level of experience your editors have. Well, in my professional opinion as an editor, science fiction, of course, is a very prickly subject. It's by far one of the most technically complex genres out there, but in my opinion, it doesn't really take anything special to edit it any more than it takes to to edit romance or historical or fantasy or crime or whatever. It's still, despite its science fiction trappings, it's still storytelling. Are you telling a good story? Are you telling a believable story? Are your characters relatable, even though they're from some far-flung galaxy, or they're insect people, or they live underground, or what have you? It's a genre a lot of people enjoy, and I think that enjoying that genre makes it easier to edit it, but I don't think any special care needs to be taken with that specific genre, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I let Jacob, because that's one of his favorite areas. So we like to let him do a lot of those. But, I've been an editor for over 15 years. I worked for a big 5 publisher, and he's right. Story is story. Every genre has their own conventions. And as long as you stay within those conventions, so those are basically just reader expectations. Like if you have a romance and they don't get together at the end, you're going to have really unhappy readers, because that's the whole point of a romance, right? So sci-fi, fantasy, whatever you have, westerns, they all have kind of their expectations for the readers. And so you need to know those, and you need to make sure that the story adheres to that. But really, once you get beyond that, it's all about a great story and great characters, no matter what the genre is, for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, Rebecca asked, an agent told me once, I love your story, but it's 129,000 words. Industry standard for fantasy is 110,000, cut and resend. Is there any truth to that? There is some truth to that. And really the issue is that it's printing costs. So, and I mean, I think in fantasy, readers certainly have more tolerance for bigger books than most people do. And that's absolutely true. You can certainly have readers that aren't going to have a problem with the extra 19,000 words. That's not so much the issue. It's just that it comes down to the amount of printing costs. So paper is expensive. It's hard to ship. It's really a challenge, just as far as the more you get, the more it costs. And so then the more the base cost is to the printer, the more you have to charge to the reader to get overhead. And sometimes that's where the pushback comes from the readers, is they don't want to pay that extra money that it costs to print out that book. But it certainly, if ebook is the only way that you're going and considering, then it's not an issue, because obviously that's, you can have ebooks of any size, and it really makes very little difference on the cost for that. So there is some truth to that, for sure. And I think there is a sense among some editors that, you were talking about cutting 19,000 words in a book that size. We're talking less than 10%, and almost every book can by that. There's probably waste we all have that we can just tighten it down a little bit more too. So he's probably coming at it from both angles, that he'd have an easier sell to whoever he's pitching it to, because the marketing people sometimes are just like, and the finance people sometimes just have kind of a knee-jerk reaction to, oh wait, that's going to be over budget. I don't know how we're going to do that. That's out of our parameters. So he's just thinking you're going to have an easier time of selling things if you are under that kind of magic mark. So that was my answer to that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jacob, you've got another one you want to pick out of the list?
Sure. Let me peruse really quickly here. Oh, down here at the bottom, we have one from Melanie, who says, how do I overcome my fear of failing as an author? That's a very good question. I think that's a question on a lot of authors' minds, my own sometimes, especially. And to that I say, and I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out, but if you're writing stories, if you're writing every day, and if you're completing things, and if you're submitting to publications, submitting to literary journals, even if you're not getting accepted, if you are going about the actions of an author, then you are succeeding as an author. You are an author at that point. You know, not every author, you know, achieves great financial success or huge readerships, but it really that question really depends on like, how do you define success? And especially when you're beginning your career, I think it's very important to set small and realistic goals for yourself. You know, not necessarily to be a bestseller in a week, but to like, you know, to finish this story or to finish this page or like finish this outline, to, you know, to open that Word document and even begin. Like, those are they're little successes, but they can add up and they'll make you feel successful until that big success eventually comes. And, you know, God willing, it will.
Yeah, Jacob hits on a great point right there. Every author I know struggles with that, being an author, feeling like a success. I know many best-selling published authors. I'm an author myself, and every author I know feels like at some point in your book when you're writing, this is terrible. Nobody's going to like this book. My other books might have been great, but this one's going to be rotten. You all seem to go through this cycle of self-doubt and frustration. And I don't know if that's part of the creative process or if it's how creatives are wired, or it's because writing is such a lonely business. But we do run into that. And so the best antidote for that is to be with other writers. If you can find a meetup group or critique group or join an online community where you can kind of share that with other people, I think you'll find so many other people are in the same boat. And they'll say the same thing. What Jacob said, the advice of just you're being diligent, doing the writing and doing the things that you need to do to define what success means for you. And for most of us, writing and being whatever term of success, like a financial success, that's a long haul. Very few people ever make it, you know, to the #1 bestseller list names that we all know, right? You know, very few people become J.K. Rowling or anything like that. However, there are plenty of successful writers. And there's something really satisfying about seeing your name on a book. And so obviously there's a lot of ways to go about that and have that happen without having to be, you know, the USA Today bestselling author. Though it certainly never hurts if you do get those credentials too. Although I have to say, I know quite a few USA Today bestselling authors, and they still wonder every book, is this going to be a good book? Is this terrible? Nobody will ever want to read it again. So that doesn't ever make you feel like you've arrived. You will still sort of keep struggling with this. So just keep on pressing on and find some other like-minded folk to be on the journey with you, and it will be really encouraging. So, okay, there's another question here. Laura asked, once a book is given to an editor, what's the average turnaround for a 10,000 word book? I will say it really depends on what kind of edits we're talking about. If we're talking about the very beginning developmental edits, our usual, we like to shoot for about a month on that first round, and that can just depend on how much work it's going to need and how many, if it needs to go back to the author or things like that. I should say there's really not a huge standard because a lot of it depends on workload too. And so, I mean, if we're talking about from the time it hits my desk when I can actually work on it, yeah, then it should be about a month. But sometimes it'll hit my desk and I can't get to it right away because it's behind 6 other manuscripts. The kind of the industry standard is, if you think about it this way, is the first round of edits, the developmental edits that I was talking about earlier. Industry standard is 4 to 6 pages an hour. So if you think about, 250 words is considered a page. So 10,000 words, was that 50 pages maybe? So 50, I can't do math. So anyways, you could do the math. So the first round, 4 to 6 pages an hour. The second round of edits, 6 to 8 pages an hour. And the final round of edits, if we're talking like proofreading and stuff, 8 to 10 pages an hour. So that can kind of give you a very rough general guideline of how long that will take. Okay, so do you want to take the one from, actually, no, you're too young to answer this question. I'll answer this question.
Like, I literally can't answer this. I wasn't there.
Deborah asked, I'm returned to writing after being published 26 years ago. Have readers changed? Do they require a more diluted narrative today than in the past? So there's a couple things I would say. Yes, readers have changed in that they have very short attention spans now. Back in the day, we used to call it the MTV generation. Now it's like the multitasking, instant micro attention span generation. So attention spans are short. So you've got to grab readers, grab them right away. Again, as we were saying, certainly some readers love long books. And so I'm not saying you have to write a super short book. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it does have to be compelling. There's not a lot of leeway for a lot of description or a lot of narrative. Things have to be moving along. And what I have seen that means in the style, how the writing style has changed is that, back in the day, you could get away with a lot of telling. You really can't get away with telling anymore. It really needs to be showing on the stage, action happening, characters doing things. The scene needs to be either an action scene where they're figuring out how to get through these obstacles to reach their goal, or it needs to be, okay, it's a dilemma scene. Something's happened. I got to figure out what to do. And then I make a decision, and that sets another action scene. And so you've got to have these things. And by action, I'm not meaning like car chases and that kind of thing. I'm talking about characters doing things that are moving the narrative forward. So you don't have a lot of, Donald Moss has a great book, Writing the Breakout Novel. And he has a workbook and a book on this. He talks about this a lot. He talks about anytime your characters sit down to have tea, you should cut it out. Anytime they're walking the dog, you should cut it out. Like he has these little things that he says, that's not doing anything. Like, I don't think he's super literal about that, but his point is that sometimes you have these crutch scenes where not a lot happens, and maybe the author is just kind of using it to convey information, like you're having tea because you need this character to tell this character something that you want the reader to know. Well, readers don't want that. It's got to come out very organically. So from that standpoint, good writing is still good writing. And as long as it's tight and you're really working on having a strong story structure and compelling characters and really driving that emotional component, so your readers are interacting with the characters on an emotional basis, then that is great storytelling, and it's going to stand the test of time. So that would be my my take on how things have changed in the past 30 years.
Mm-hmm. I will take your word for it.
Jacob hasn't been around that long, so he doesn't know. Hey, there are some good things that come with age. Some of it is actually some wisdom and knowledge, so that's good.
But I sure do hope so.
You'll get there. No worries. All right. Do you have one that's on the list that is intriguing to you?
I do. This is a fairly general one, but I think that we'll both have very different answers on this one. Linda Garfield has asked us, what do you look for in a manuscript? That's one of the classic questions from authors to editors. And this would be ostensibly an opportunity for me to kind of whinge on about manuscripts that I've received, but I'm not going to do that. I guess I'll just say like strong writing, like writing that like immediately impresses me. As editors, sometimes we'll go through between like 20 and 30 or 40 manuscripts a day. So we don't have a chance to read the entire thing usually. Like we read like the first couple of pages, and unless something like really sinks its claws into us and draws blood, we're really not going to give it that much more time unless we really think that like something is going to come up while we're reading. It basically impress us very quickly with your writing. Impress us with like a character we can immediately identify with, and we want to see their lives move forward. We want to see what's going to happen to them. Like some kind of early story twist that intrigues us, or honestly like just perfect writing, or just like strong writing, interesting writing. And I guess one more thing I would add to that is if you are submitting to TCK Publishing, or really to any editor or any publisher, your manuscript should be clean, if at all possible, like completely free of errors or like grammatical mistakes or like wonky formatting or weird fonts. It's like send us, like it should look like a book already as much as possible. Like send us something that you would want to read.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, what he said, we go through so many in a day that you have to stand out, and it's got to be characters that we want to follow 300 pages with this person because there's something about them that's likable, that's admirable, that's intriguing. And you don't have a lot of time to ramp up into the story. The story's got to start right away. And so I always tell people, start the story on the day things change. What has rocked this person's world that they can no longer continue the way they've been going? And now this new information has come in, and or this thing has happened or whatever, and they have to go on this new journey that they were not planning on doing. And that is what makes things really interesting, because we all know what it feels like to go through that. So we're immediately in there on an emotional level. The emotional scorecard ultimately is the only thing that matters. If your reader has an emotional response to your story, and I'm not meaning like they have to cry or anything, but they have to be like, oh, I want to know what happens to this person. I'm sucked in to their life. I want to know what's going on. There's actual real brain chemistry about what happens with all of that. And so you need to trigger that. And that's the kind of thing that's going to make for a really successful story. So that's a great question. Good question. There is a question here from Thomas. I don't know anyone in the industry. How do I find a literary agent to read my work? I have some really great suggestions for that. One, conferences. Conferences are my favorite way to get to know people. So if you can go to a writing conference, there's a lot of regional ones. Those are a great way. There's some really big national ones too. Sometimes those are fabulous to go to. If you can't, they can be expensive. But certainly if you're writing in a particular genre, all those genres have conferences, but there's usually some local and regional ones that you can go to. Those are the best ways, because editors are there, agents are there, and there's nothing like having that personal touch and having a name with a face, being able to talk with them and interact with them. So I highly recommend conferences. You can also pick up a writer's market guide. They have them at the library, they have them at the bookstore, they probably have an online version, and it lists every agency that is part of the agents and authors representative group, and people that they've get in their database and that kind of thing. So there's a listing there, but then of course you're just kind of cold calling people, and it can be really, really difficult to get an agent that way, although not unheard of. Certainly people do it. But my number one favorite way is to recommend conferences, because you learn a lot, you connect with other authors, you get a chance to meet editors and agents. So it's kind of a win-win-win all the way around. If you can afford the money to do it, that's really my best advice. All right. You got another one, Jacob?
Yeah, I'll take this next one.
Sure.
Eduardo has asked us, I'm finishing a steampunk novel, but I'm not sure if the genre is popular. I hear it's going to be a hit after the Mortal Engines movie comes to theaters. God willing, that's a hit, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? Well, Eduardo, I have good news for you. At least as far as I know, the steampunk genre, or the steampunk style, while not like worldwide popular, does have a sizable and rabid fan base. Like, the people who are into steampunk are really into steampunk, and the key, I believe, to marketing this novel is really marketing it in that niche genre. The cover and the title and the writing and all of your marketing around it should scream to your readers, this is steampunk. If you're looking for steampunk, this is the next big thing. And I think if you do that, and and of course, like, if you've written a good story, there is a good chance that it could be a hit. It's a hot genre right now. So.
Yeah, I agree. I know people that write steampunk, and they do have, she just had some of her books translated into German. Super popular there. So, yeah, it is a popular genre. And like a lot of these niche genres, because there's not a ton of competition, you do really have a chance to shine there. And like Jacob was saying, their fans are really rabid, and they are looking for more to read. So that is a great place to be. And so, improve your craft and keep going on it, and I think you have some great opportunity there. So excellent. Sure. I have a question from Abigail. How should my male leads communicate and relate to other people in the story? I understand how he should act with other main characters, but what about the people that are not his close friends? What kind of things would he do? That kind of thing. So this really goes back to characterization. And this can be a challenge if you're writing an opposite sex character. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it can be for women to get in the minds of men or men to get in the minds of women, vice versa, right? There's a great book I love by Brandolyn Collins called Getting into Character. She is a former actress, and she's taken a lot of stage techniques and translated them into the writing world. And so that's a really fabulous place to start for developing character. But the other thing is just to think about real people that you know, or even people in your favorite TV shows that maybe you've been watching for a long time. And think about how they respond to the different people in different situations and different, you know, with different characters, and how do they act and that kind of thing. I mean, we are all kind of multi-dimensional people. And so we may respond, you know, in one way to your boss and one way to your little brother. You might just have a variety of ways that you act. And so being observant and looking at that in your real life, and obviously in TV shows, but also even books. Those are some really great resources to just become aware of how those things can play out, and then just experiment with putting that on the page and seeing how that plays out. And if you've got some good readers who can give you feedback on if that's working or not, and if that feels real or not, that's a great way to just really stretch that muscle and develop it over time. All right. Do you have another one, Jacob?
I would actually like to add a little bit to the question you just answered, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is admittedly something I've struggled with as well. I'm going to answer this much more as an author than as an editor. In the stories I've written, I usually write in my own gender, and I've struggled often to really, like, you know, capture the voice of the opposite sex. But if I had any advice to give at all, it would be like, don't think of your character or your narrator as a man. Like, if you're starting with that, like, you're already going to get a little bit mixed up. Like, think about the personality first, almost like divorced of gender, like divorced of sexes. Think about, how does this person think? How does this person talk? How does this person act? And if you're really thinking about them close enough, I think that whatever trappings of his sex he has will follow almost automatically.
It's a good point. It's very true. You know, personality is personality, right? And so while it may be influenced by gender in certain ways, there are, you know, if you're an outgoing person, if you're male or female, it doesn't necessarily make as big of a difference as if you're an introvert. So you're right. Personality can play a huge role in that for sure. Good. Okay. So Lizzie just asked, is there a certain way a writer should approach a final edit of their novel before it's sent to beta readers? Do you have a list of things that should be fixed or looked for? I'm not talking about basic editing, grammar, punctuation, but editing that goes beyond that, like characters, etc. That's a good question. A lot of authors, I mean, this is probably different for every author. I mean, some authors do have checklists like, did I use all 5 senses in this scene, you know, or most of them, right? Did my character in each scene move forward in some manner? In other words, did he have a goal at this scene, and did it occur or not occur, right? And sometimes not occur is great because it means you've built up conflict. You know, does every scene move the story forward? You know, so everybody has kind of a different approach of how they like to put all those pieces in. Do they do it in the rough draft? Some people have to have that stuff in the rough draft. Otherwise, they don't see it by the time they're through their other edits. You know, probably the most valuable thing you can ever find is 2 or 3 people who can read your stuff and give you good, honest feedback. They don't have to be editors or authors or anything. They just have to be readers who will say to you, this part didn't make a lot of sense to me, or I was confused. I don't think his motivation, like, that didn't feel real genuine. Whatever it is that they will point out to you, or this part was kind of slow. because you have the whole story in your head, and it's just really difficult to get that objective space from it. And so it's really hard to say what you need to work on without somebody outside of you saying to you, this part needs to be fixed. So I always highly recommend, before you send it in anywhere, if you can have some people who you really trust to give you honest feedback, that is the best way to figure out what you do need to work on in that final edit. You have thoughts on that, Jacob?
I do. I don't have like a personal checklist I use, but I think if there's one thing you should look for in your manuscript, like one major thing before you're going to send it off to your beta readers, ask yourself after you've reread your manuscript, is your main character a different person at the beginning of the story and at the end of the story? Have they changed?
Yeah.
And if they have, that's a narrative. You've got the basics of a book there, and that's probably the hardest thing to accomplish. And if you've got that, at least in some respect, it's ready to be read. And like the rest of the story will eventually fall in place around that as more people read it and as you get more additional feedback on the story.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of the book, right? The character has to change and be a different person at the end of the novel than at the beginning. Otherwise, what was the point, right? So exactly, that is a really good point. Do you want to answer Debbie's question?
Sure. Debbie has asked us, I'm a new author. I'm working on self-edits in my first draft. How much is too much self-editing before I turn it over to an editor? Debbie, I think you've hit upon something very important, that there is, in fact, such a thing as too much self-editing. You can get too far in the weeds with your book. And I've been in a situation where I'm on my 12th or 13th draft of something, and I'm like, the only edit I'm doing with that was I'm switching the order of like 2 words on a page back and forth. I have like 18 drafts, but like that. If you get to that point, that's too much. And on the other hand, though, like this is where it gets really woolly, is that there's also no real endpoint for developmental editing. Like your book can always be better because there is no perfect story. There is no ideal way to write the story that's in your head. So it really just comes down to a point of like, are you exhausted, or like you have to, like, there has to be like some kind of like arbitrary cutoff. Like, all right, I'm not really getting anything done. I think there's still stuff I can fix, but I can't see them anymore. I'm getting too into the nitty gritty. I just gotta pass this off and take a break from it. That's really when you send it off to your beta readers or to an editor or to anybody who's going to take like that first big look at your draft, that's the opportunity to like really take a big step back from your manuscript and let it sit and let those characters and those plot things kind of like tumble around in your head. And sometimes by purposefully not thinking about your story, that's when you get your best ideas.
Yeah, I think that's true. You can really start getting yourself kind of all wrapped up. Are you making it better? Are you making it worse? It's really hard. Sometimes you just, like you said, you're just rearranging the deck chairs. You're not doing anything better. Taking a break is a great way to get away from it and just put some space in there. Come back to it with fresh eyes. Let somebody else read it. All that kind of thing. Because there is no hard and fast rule. It's not like, hey, 5 is the perfect number of edits, 6 is too much. Like, there's no rule like that, I wish there was, but it's art more than science in a lot of ways. And so those are the things that make it challenging. But yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. We have a question from Johnson. Says, thanks for doing this Q&A. Is there a software that can give you deadlines so that you are encouraged to write? Sure, there's all sorts of things that you can do. I really like Scrivener. I mentioned Scrivener earlier. I like Scrivener as a writing tool. In Scrivener, you can set target goals for your project. You can set a date, you can set a word count, and it will give you a little, little progress bar that goes from red to green. I like turning it green every day. Seriously, this is like the big thing for me. If I can go in there and get my word count in, I'll know, okay, well, if I have a month to write how many ever words, it'll tell me how many days that is. And if I or how many words per day. And I can pick, do I want to write on the weekends or not? And if I cut things out, then I go into the negative, which still needs to happen, but you know, it's a little more discouraging. But it is a great way to keep track of what you need to do and how much you need to do each day. You can certainly do something with an Excel spreadsheet. You know, it's not super complicated, but a Scrivener's not terribly expensive. So, I mean, I want to say it's like $49 or something. It's not really very expensive. So it's a great writing tool, and it does so many more things. It's a great, I look at it like a virtual binder. Not only do you can put in all your scenes and shuffle them around, but you can put all your research in there and pictures and websites and all that kind of stuff. So you can have everything in one category. So I really like Scrivener as a writing tool. Word is fine for what it does, but like if you're trying to cut scenes and move them around, like that doesn't work very well in Word. So Scrivener is excellent for that. And it's got this great bonus of being able to help you track how many words you've written and how many you need to go. So I'm really motivated that way. So I don't know if you are, but if you can get it turned from red to green, you're like, yes, this is a great day. So that can be really motivating, you know. I don't know. What do you?
As a matter of fact, TCK Publishing actually has an entire blog entry about various online tools and systems you can use to keep on track. My personal favorite is one that I used to use during National Novel Writing Month called Write or Die, which is, Write or Die is fantastic. You go on this website, you open this, just like this very simple Word window, you begin typing. I think you could enter in like how many words per minute you're supposed to be writing, or like how fast you should be writing, or how many words you want to do total. And if you're not hitting these deadlines, the screen will start to turn like blood red, and like an alarm will start going. So if you don't want to have these horrible, terrible things that happen to you, or for it to start like unwriting what you're writing, if you go too slow, you have to keep going. And obviously it's not for everybody. It can be a little bit stressful to have like all these like horror movie things happening to you while you're just trying to write your book. But if it does motivate you, it can actually be very, very effective. At least I found it to be so.
I like that, because if you are like in NaNoWriMo, where you're really trying to get just words down and you're trying to get past, you know, writer's block, or you just need to get words on the page, that's an excellent way to do it, because you don't have time for your self-editor to be in there second guessing you. So if that's the thing you're struggling with, absolutely, something like that would really help you break through some of that stuff, because then you're not worried about, oh, the perfect word, I need the perfect word. Nope, I got to just keep going. So that's awesome. That actually sounds kind of fun.
It's terrifying, but I love it.
I know. It'll be fun, or it'll give you a heart attack. One of the two, right? You know, I guess that's why they call it writer.
Why not both? Why not both?
That's great. I love it. We have a question from Arlene, and I want to pick this one up because this happens to a lot of writers. My biggest challenge is the harsh criticism of one self-proclaimed reader. It's virtually crippled me. I haven't written in over a year. Why must I hang on to one woman's critique when so many love my writing? How do I get my mojo back? And we talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about, you know, what makes you feel like a writer and fulfilled and stuff like that. And reviews are really, really hard for writers to take. I have one author friend who calls them rat poison, and says, don't ever drink rat poison. So don't ever read your reviews because it's rat poison. Now, you may get some helpful things from reviews, but someone else should read your reviews for you. And then if there's anything useful in there, they can tell you. And I think that's really good advice. If you're someone that's sensitive to that, absolutely be very careful about who you let speak into your writing world. One of the things to think about is that person's motivation. Were they really motivated in helping you become a better writer, or are they just trying to be mean? I mean, there's unfortunately way too many people in the world that just want to be mean. And you really shouldn't give any weight to those people because they don't have your best interests at heart. They have really no reason to have anything positive or helpful or constructive to say about your work. I think what Jacob was saying earlier about your why and determining why are you writing and what does success mean to you, maybe spend some time thinking about that and thinking about like you said, all the good things that people have said, and that if you stop writing, you are depriving the world of those things. Nobody else can write what you can write. And so if you're not writing, then the world's not getting to read the things that you can put out there. And so not only is this person affecting you, but she's affecting a lot of people that would like to read what you're writing. And so I would just encourage you, however you can do it. And I'm sure there are plenty of positive affirmations and things on the internet about how to counteract negativity and negative thoughts. And there's things like writing them down and throwing them in the fire, and I mean, a lot of different things like that. And maybe go through some of those exercises and see if there's something that really rings true to you, so you can figure out how to get this person out of your life and how you can just focus on the positive things and all the positive things that you need to accomplish with your writing, because people really are enjoying what you write and they want more of it. And you don't want one person who's just probably doesn't feel very good about themselves and is taking it out on everybody else, and you just kind of happen to be the person in the line of fire that day. You don't want them to be able to deprive other people of the good things that you can bring. But this is a really common problem. So just remember, it's rat poison. Don't drink it. Jacob, do you want to take the next one?
Sure.
Well, you can start with the Debbie one, or you can do another one, or I can take the Debbie one. It's up to you.
I might let you take the Debbie one. I've got one from Joe, who asks us, I'm having a problem coming up with a good storyline for my next project. The novel I recently completed was a marathon of research and very emotional to complete. Now I feel drained. Well, Joe, that's very true. Like, writing, especially like a project that's so like research intensive, it can be exhausting. Like, writing, it takes something out of a lot of people, and I think especially in your situation, maybe your next project shouldn't be so research induced. Like, I try writing more close to home. There's the old writing adage that says, like, write what you know. Like, take your next storyline from your own life, some aspect of your own human experience. I think that like well-researched projects like have the potential to be very, very interesting and very, very moving, and very educational for the readers. But something that comes from your heart and comes from your experience, I think, has potential to be just as moving and just as emotionally powerful as anything you can get out of a book.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Writing can be really draining, and sometimes you just need to take a break, depending on what's going on with your life and the project you've just finished and all that kind of thing. So it's certainly fine to take some space and let your well kind of get filled back up, because it is draining, and you're giving away part of yourself. And that's what makes good art. And that's, when you're putting your heart on the page, other people are going to respond and resonate with that, but it is really draining. So it's certainly fine to take something completely different, do a totally different kind of story or something like that. So it's all part of the natural process. There's nothing super unusual about that. Debbie asked, what are the pros and cons of traditional publishing versus self-publishing for a new author? So there's really, this is really a personal choice. I know lots of people who've done it either way. There's not like a right answer or a wrong answer. It just kind of depends on you and your personality and your goals for your writing. So traditional publishing, a lot of people really want to go that way. That's like their first choice, because they feel like there's a legitimacy that is placed upon them by saying that they were published with a traditional publisher. And that's true, because they do have a lot of gatekeepers. You usually have to have an agent. You have to get through the editors, through the submission process and to the editors and all that kind of thing. The advantages is that you get a professional edit, you get a professional cover. And then from there on, it kind of depends on the house. Some traditional publishers pay very low royalties, 12, 13% maybe, depending. Some of them pay advances, some of them don't. Some of them do some marketing, but the trend now is to not do a lot of marketing. Pretty much what happens is publishers have catalogs that come out 3 times a year. and their salesmen take those to the bookstores and sell them, and your book will be in that catalog. And so they may point out your particular book when they're selling it, or they may not. It just might be in the catalog. But after it's not in that catalog, then it's not talked about anymore. So with traditional publishing, you have to have a big launch. So because your book is only going to be on the shelf for 4 months, and after that, it's back stock. Nobody's going to really think about it anymore. So it's important that you have a big launch and that you use that short period of time to get as many sales as you can get. Because if you don't sell well in those first 4 months, you don't really get a second chance. And if your numbers aren't good, you're not going to get another contract. So that's kind of the pro and con with traditional publishing. With self-publishing, it runs the whole gamut. Basically, you do have to realize you are your own publisher. So you have to hire out everything you cannot do yourself. And you have to be realistic about what you can do yourself. If you're not a graphic designer that knows how to do covers, don't do your own cover, because you will shoot yourself in the foot with a poor cover. Same thing with professional editing. Please get a professional edit, because that is your reputation that is going out there. And if it's full of typos and if it's not well constructed, people will comment and you will get poor reviews. And you're going to want to put out a professional product. So make sure that you know how to do those things. You have to be motivated on deadlines, because you're the only one holding yourself accountable to a deadline. Nobody else is doing that anymore. And then you do have to do all of your own marketing, which is in some ways not a whole lot more than you would do, with a traditional publisher, because so much of that is falling back on authors these days. So from the marketing standpoint, you won't have, it's not a huge difference, I would say. Yeah, you don't have someone taking a catalog with you and putting you in stores. But I would say these days, I couldn't tell you the last time I bought a book out of a bookstore. I buy from Amazon. That's like what everybody does, right? You buy from Amazon. So, you're automatically in the world's largest bookstore. So from that standpoint, and then you do have some other advantages in that you can put your book on sale if you want. You can run a promo. You can do all sorts of different things. You can do deals with other authors. There's a lot of things that you can do to promote yourself, that when you are with a publisher, you get stuck and you can't always do that. The other thing is, and I would say this is the one thing to keep in mind, traditional publishing, you don't pay for, but you sign away your rights, and you sign them away pretty much for life. Sometimes you can get them back, but for the most part you can't. Self-publishing, obviously you keep all of your rights, and you can hire people. So for example, if someone says, I will charge you X number of dollars to do these 3 things for you, that's perfectly fine, as long as you're not giving away any of your rights. So sometimes there's some of this vanity publishing, or some people who are taking advantage, and they take your rights and they take your money. Those 2 things should not go together. At TCK, we only take a 5-year contract. So you don't sign your rights away for more than 5 years with us. So that's a great advantage of being someone like TCK, who's a little more author-centric. So that's kind of the general broad brush. Like I said, there's not a right way or a wrong way. It's just a lot depending on where you are in your writing career, what you want out of it, and your own personality. Some people just don't want to manage doing all of that work themselves, and might have difficulty with timelines and those kinds of things. So it just depends. Really, if you are self-pubbing, you have to remember that you are your own publisher and you're like a small business, and so you have to kind of treat it that way. So those are kind of the main differences between the 2. Do you want to take Taylor's question?
Sure. I think this will probably be our last one. I think we've run a little bit over. We're still going to 6, or are we going longer?
You can ask Tom.
That's good. I might but I also might not. We'll see. Taylor has asked us concerning personal opinions from beta readers and editors. When is it good to take their advice? When is it not necessarily helpful to your final draft? That entirely depends on what you mean by personal opinions. Of course, if you're consulting a professional editor, Tom said you guys can stop whenever you want, but we might go a little over. You guys have some really good questions.
Yeah.
As far as personal opinion go, I assume that means like personal preferences in stories. Like some beta readers and some editors like certain stories more than others. Like some like science fiction more than fantasy, some like romance more than historical fiction. And to get more into the nitty gritty, like some like certain tropes more than others. They might think that your story is better served going in a certain direction or something like that. And when you're deciding how seriously to take that kind of advice, it really comes down to like how much do you trust this person? Um, do you think that they have your best interest at heart? Are they just wanting to like mold your story to like their specifications? Is it like I don't know, is it a pride thing, or are they genuinely trying to help your story? And then you have to make a decision like even if this will make your story better, you also run into like, is that the story you want to tell? Like, is it better or is it just different? So it's never an easy question to answer, but again, I guess I'll repeat like the big important thing is like to decide how much do you trust this reader and how much do you trust their professional opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think at some point you just have to go with your gut. Does it feel like it's natural? Like when you get a good critique, you're like, yes, that's exactly what I was trying to convey. Thank you for helping me figure that out. If you get a bad critique, it's going to be like, that wasn't quite where I was going with that. Like, it just doesn't feel right. And if it doesn't feel right, then feel free to ignore it, because really nobody knows the story but you. And so I think it's important that you stay true to your story. Um, there's a couple more I'm going to hit on that I have seen through here, kind of, combining a thing I see coming over and over. There is, Brittany asks, my biggest questions are, can there be too much dialogue? What defines a scene's length and punctuation? So this comes up a lot. How long should a chapter be? How long should a scene be? If you, how much dialogue is too much, right? If you pull out 5 random books, you will get 5 different answers. There's not a right or wrong answer to that. Some authors are very consistent. I have 1,500 words a scene. I have 2 scenes in a chapter, blah, 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 blah. I have 30 chapters in a book. Done. Some people are kind of all over the place depending on what the scene needs. I mean, it's really what works. What is working for your story? What works for your writing style? I like to pull out authors that are writing in the genre I'm writing that I really love and see what they do. Like, just tear the book apart. Get in there. Okay, how many words were in this scene? How many scenes in this chapter? How many chapters in the book? And just really kind of like take a yellow pad and just make a list. And I analyzed a few books like that when I was first starting out because I just really wanted to get a sense of the structure. And that can be really eye-opening for you to say, hey, well, wait, I thought it had to be this, and no, it's this. And so sometimes you'll get in there and you'll really get a strong sense of that. So I always recommend, feel free to dig into books that you really love and figure out what they're doing that makes it work. The other question is, there's a lot of questions on commas and punctuation and grammar. And I'm going to pull out my grammar resource here. So the ultimate guide to all of those questions is the Chicago Manual Style, but it's really technical and it's written towards editors for the most part. So I don't recommend necessarily you grab that. But I'm looking for where's my list here? There is a book that it takes kind of the high points of that. Here, okay, so Strunk and White's The Elements of Style is a classic. It's definitely worth picking up. They're into the 4th edition right now. That's definitely one you're going to want to pick up. Sometimes you might even have it. If you went to college and had to write papers, sometimes they recommend that one. But it's a very good basic book to have. The other one is called The Careful Writer, A Guide to Modern English Usage by Theodore Bernstein. That is also an easy book to read and to help you understand what makes good writing. You don't really need to get hung up so much on the punctuation and that, but it is a tool. If you're a writer, it is a tool, and it is a tool you need to know how to use. So a good basic grammar book like that, a good basic usage book that you can use and refer to. I mean, nobody's going to reject your manuscript because you have a comma in the wrong place, right? So you don't need to stress out about that. You need to really focus on the character and the story and that kind of thing. But that being said, it's certainly great to have a good grasp of those tools of your trade and to use them well. Jacob, were there some other common comments that you saw that you would like to comment on? I said that like 3 times.
Honestly, I think we've covered a lot of like the really big ones, like the ones that repeat in the list. I think we have time for like one more though. I'm trying to find like a really juicy one.
Yeah, we had
a
bunch of questions. Like you guys sent in like 90 questions ahead of time, so that was awesome. That was really great. And then you've been asking great questions all the way through, and we will do something like this again because I think it's really great for you guys to be able to have access to this. I am happy to be able to share with you the things that I know and help you along on your writing and publishing journeys. So
now, this has been really fun.
And we figured out how to work the technology, so we might as well put that knowledge to good use.
Very true. Very true. Now, we've talked about writing voice already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We've talked about so much today, so it's all kind of running together a little bit.
Together. Yeah. Yeah, Lizzie just
right.
asked to be able to view the video, and yeah, it'll stay posted in Facebook, so you'll be able to go back to it at any time and listen to us. Anything that you missed.
Here's kind of a niche one from Kate. Historical fiction could use a more contemporary sounding female voice using the setting and action to convey the period. I am writing about Stuart, England. That's a kind of a tough one. It depends on like how she's speaking. I think that if it's like her inner narration, as long as they're using like the same, I guess like the same vocabulary, like they're calling things that she sees the same name they would use in that time period, she can talk a little bit more contemporarily, I think that's the word. But when she's talking out loud, she's just still use the same diction and vocabulary and voice, and I guess dialect is the word that you would use in that era. A lot of what sells historical fiction is the way the characters talk, and if it doesn't sound authentic, it can turn genre diehards off.
Yeah.
A lot of them are pretty dedicated to like the research and to like the really immersing themselves in the style and in the atmosphere of these bygone eras. And like if you're not doing a good job of like really immersing them in that genre and in that era with the character's voice and with their experience, they might not want to read your book. Like it is important.
Yeah, you'll hear about it in the reviews for sure. And sometimes people in historicals, your readers will think they know something that they don't really know. So it's always great to do an author's note that explains the research you did. I mean, I'm not talking a research paper, but just like, hey, I found out this really interesting fact, and did you know, and blah, 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 and put some in the author's note. It's also great to add some of that stuff to your website and maybe blog posts or whatever. And it's an interesting problem to have because you don't have, language changes over time, obviously. You don't have to go back too far before it becomes ununderstandable. Even getting into the Stuart period, certainly word meaning has changed. So you want to have the flavor of it, more of the sentence construction, even how they order the words. That can give a flavor even more so than the actual words. But you certainly want to sprinkle in some of the real legitimate words at the time. Please don't use dialect where like you're putting commas and you see this sometimes where people try to drop the G's and they put or they make the words the way they sound. It's really hard for readers to read. You can do like an occasional little sprinkle of that, but for the most part, like people do this a lot if they're writing an Irish or Scottish dialect, and just throwing a few words here and there to season it, but otherwise it's too much. But a great way is if you can read original diaries from the period or anything written from the period, it'll give you a real sense of that language. And sometimes if you read that right before you start writing it, you'll kind of have it in your head and you'll be able to make sure that you're getting that authentic flavor. It's kind of a tightrope, making sure it's still legible and enjoyable for modern readers, but still giving them that sense that they're traveling back in time and being able to experience that full historical experience. So exactly, it is an interesting place to be, but it's fun. And that's one of the great things about being a writer is you can time travel, right? You can go back, you can go forward, you can go all sorts of places, and because books are fabulous in that way. So well, this has been super fun tonight. You guys have had great questions. We're really excited to be able to offer this to you guys. We figured out the technology. So like I said, we will be doing this again. And so stay tuned to the Facebook page and obviously on the mailing list. Get on there and we'll be letting you know the next time we have one that's scheduled. But thank you guys so much for your participation. This has been really awesome and we've been glad to have you here. So we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you.
All right. See you guys later. All right.
See you guys later.
Okay. Bye-bye.